Hi, folks. Smokin Joe with the Cracker Culture Podcast. I'm a local children's advocate in Southwest Florida, and I would like for you to take the time to watch this conversation with Robert Daniels, local Lee County School District teacher, and also a representative of T.A.L.C, and Jacqueline Perez, a local advocate from Island Park. I believe you'll find this information informative and useful, and it is information you need to know. Please, if you would take the time to watch this, if you're a parent, you're a teacher, you work as a paraprofessional, this video will give you information that you really want to see. Thank you again for all your support. And again, please like, share, and follow our videos and let everybody know that if the truth is what you seek, Smokin Joe is here to bring it to you. Thank you. Have a good day. Folks, we're joined now with Robert Daniels. Robert is a school teacher with the Lee County School District. He is also on the executive committee of the T.A.L.C. Was that union? You'd say, Robert, is it T.A.L.C? How would you explain T.A.L.C?
The T.A.L.C is the teachers union for Lee County.
Lee County. And Jacqueline Perez is with us, advocate from Island Park. We're going to discuss some of the things that's going on with the money and what's happening with the pay and things like that. Robert, what you've been a very outspoken teacher, one of the most outspoken teachers in the district, and I applaud you for it. How's that affecting your relationship with T.A.L.C at this time?
Um, I can't really say because I was outspoken before I was a member of T.A.L.C, so they've kind of known what they were getting into with everything. Um, I don't take talking points either, from the union or anyone else. When I go up there, I speak my mind to the benefit or detriment of, whoever might be involved. But one of the biggest projects I have is I try to get the teachers to go up to the school board and tell their stories, especially, the ones who are truly hurting financially, that this board has the power to help, but they choose not to. Like last May, I had one woman up there that was a widow with 5 children. By the time you take the health care out of the teacher pay, there wasn't, enough for her to keep her house. She was looking at losing her house.
Hmm. Yeah, it's sad. I mean, the district has so much unnecessary spending, and Jacqueline's going to weigh in on that. But the thing that I don't understand is when you guys talk about the teachers, and I know that you're trying to get them to come up. You're one of the few that does. And earlier in the interview with former school board member Gwen Gittens, she said a lot of people that want to speak just say, why? Because it's like you know how it is. You go up there and you're speaking your mind and you're trying to pull your heart out, and the district's just sitting there, just letting it go in one ear and out the other. And like I told Miss Gittens, uh, your fellow teachers need to know that it's not that school board ain't hearing them. They need their voices heard so that somebody outside of this district will see what they're going through, see the suffering, and see really the unfairness of the way that the district is wastefully spending our money.
Yeah. And, part of it could be, I just kind of look at teaching a little differently. I look at it as a civil service. That's why if I have margin orders of teach the kids this, not this, I don't fuss. That's my job is to teach what I'm told. So that kind of outlook on it is when I see what's going on, it's time to speak up. We can't give the service we're supposed to give if we're short hundreds of teachers. We can't give the service we need to give if half your teaching population is working a second job and is dead on their feet come 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Right. A lot of teachers I've spoken to are doing Uber Eats, doing DoorDash, waitressing, tutoring at night, anything that they can do to make extra money because they're not making ends meet, especially with all the inflation we've had. Um,
The inflation's really bad. I spoke at the school board the one time, and I had pulled up the money my biology teacher made, and I broke it down into the number of like 2 liters of soda that we could buy. Now, my teacher was making like $35,000 a year in 2005. She could buy 30 some odd 2 liters of Coke on her, hourly pay because they were $1 each. I can buy 12 now because they're $3, $4 each. And that's a huge change in spending power, even when you look away from the raw money. And, I break it down for them all the time. It's like from 2010 until now, there's been a 17% decrease in teacher pay. That's just on the inflation, not even taking into account the expense changes. During that same time frame, they've added 22,000 students to the school district, and they've got 500 fewer teachers on the payroll. When you have fewer teachers and 20,000 or 20% more students, you would think that payroll wouldn't be an issue, that you would be able to offer competitive pay. I believe it was the former superintendent, Dr. Benier or Benier, how did you say his name?
Bernier.
Benier.
Yeah.
He said that they aimed to have salaries at 40% of market cap or market average. And at a 40%, when you're at 40% on that, you're not going to attract anyone when only 34% of the population holds a bachelor's degree or better.
Right.
It's unbelievable to me. Now, the board has talked about how they want to work on retention. And, excuse me. The board has talked about how they want to work on retention. From what I'm hearing, it don't seem like that there's a lot of people that is in the district now planning on staying coming up the next year.
Well, by my memory, we had our best retention the year they gave out the quote unquote 8% raise, which they communicated very poorly. That 8% was an average, but teachers got between 5 and 12.5% depending on their number of years in, because we have to decompress from when Governor DeSantis raised the floor with the base teacher pay and brought it up. They didn't give the veteran teachers a raise in kind. And that led to a lot of people leaving to begin with because, you've been here for 15 years. Now you're making the same money as a first year teacher. That's a slap in the face. And that was kind of the straw that broke the back on a lot of things. But, you hear them leaving all the time. And a lot of the times it's not even pay. It's the discipline issues. It's things of, the way I put it is, kids have free will, especially the older students. They are their own person. And there seems to be this expectation when it comes to student discipline and student achievement that the teachers have mind control powers and can control what those kids are deciding to do. When for years now, there's been no culture discipline as a district rule and no expectations for the kids. So they're living up to what's been expected to them, and trying to get that to change instantly is very hard when no one backs you up on it.
And especially if you don't have the staffing. I mean, they're low on teachers numbers and paras and security, and it's like, I hate to compare it to a jail, but if you don't have enough guards, the prisoners will riot.
Yeah, the inmates will take over. But now, let's talk about with the teacher pay. Robert, what are your feelings on this potential lobbyist company making this enormous amount of money to lobby? And I don't really know why we need the lobbying with the superintendent having the ear of the governor. How does that make you feel that they're spending all that money creating jobs for other Terry Millerites, and they're not helping the teachers?
Well, we all know it's a problem when one moneyed interest holds all the votes.
Yeah.
It's the same oligarchy that, gave rise to tyranny in ancient Greece and helped bring down Rome. We've seen the problem with this over and over, and it's been called foul on for so long on the federal government level, the state government level, and now on the local government level. It's a problem. I don't see where you need $27,000 a month for somebody to go up there and lobby. That's what, if you do the quick math, it's over $250,000 a year. You don't have to pay me $250,000 to go to Tallahassee and yell at people.
Yeah, 270 plus all reimbursements, all paid expenses for travel, food, phone, whatever they need, lodging. They have an open, checkbook, if you want to call it that. And then on top of that, Robert, we do have Gray Robertson, which is a lobbyist firm that we pay $7,000 a month to. And then they created 2 government liaison positions for 2 women who have connections to the local cabal. And 6 of the board members and the superintendent all belong to or had some kind of benefits that they received being having Terry Miller as their campaign manager or helping them with mailers.
And on the behalf of lobbying, the union as well sends people up to lobby, and a lot of the things the union lobbies for are the same things
Same
that they
things.
lobby for. It's
Okay,
teacher pay, stuff for students, getting
forgot about that.
more support personnel in for the kids, and putting some teeth into things like they lobbied against removing the fines for violating the teacher maximum classroom size for the students. Well, as soon as the fines went away, suddenly the class sizes increased by what, another 15%? And it's just, it makes the teacher's job harder, but what do you think's happening to the quality of the education for the kid when you're going from having 25 kids in a classroom to 35 to 40?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I forgot about that. You guys lobby as well. And then the FSBA also lobbies on the behalf of the school district, and they pay them an enormous amount of money annually. And the school district hasn't done any cost analysis on their jobs and contracts that they award in maintenance and construction. I think that's an issue. I don't think they've monitored the public funds that they receive, where they could apply a lot of that money. When they're doing their budget at the beginning of the year, they could do extra money to operations, which would help fund teachers' increases in their raise. I believe they have the money to pay teachers what they deserve. I believe that. I've seen it.
At one point, I did develop like a spreadsheet of using all of the financial reports from the Department of Education on the state level, which is all the receipts for how much each of the counties said they were paying. I took Lee County and I broke down as a percentage how much of the general budget that's allowed to go to salaries. And going back again to like 2010, it was close to 40% of the budget was going to salaries. And we're down some years, it's below 30%. So when you were missing 12% of the money, well, just think you could give every teacher a 12% raise if you did that.
Wow.
That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it that always blows my mind is they're up there lobbying for this, that, and the other thing. We get unfunded resolutions. Like after Parkland happened, there was the unfunded mental health resolution that now every single teacher is also a mental health professional, which we're not qualified for. They give us a 6-hour training, and we should not be even dallying in this. We are not. There's too many students, not enough teachers, and adding another professional's job on top of what we were already doing was bad ideas to begin with. But they don't fund it either. And none of that really affects the core of what the district's job is supposed to be, which is instilling the ability to learn, the ability to self-teach, and manage information into the students. And none of the lobbying they're doing is about changing the system and making it more effective. There's no talks about restructuring elementary school so that the kids are ability based. So all of your struggling readers are together no matter how old they are, with a teacher that's efficient and specialized in reading instruction, taking
Right.
your struggling math kids and get them into there. Even on the high school level, it makes no sense that we're going to separate you by your age rather than by what you can do with where
Right.
you're at right now, if we really cared about learning as an outcome. Instead, we have the graduation rate determines the funding. So the graduation rate's always up because all the kids that aren't going to graduate somehow disappear off the rolls.
Right.
And the kids we do graduate only have a literacy rate of about 65%.
That's just so sad when you break it down like that. That we have a school district with the budget they have, and I think somebody needs to start asking the questions. Why are our children failing if our taxes keep funding more and more? And what are you lobbying for? If you're not lobbying to better the education, that's what you say it's for, but what are you using the money for when you get it?
Well, one of the things that I remember very recently now, when I said that, Governor DeSantis raised the floor of the teacher pay, that needed to be done. I was burned probably worse than anyone else, and I voted for DeSantis and voted for him again because I felt he had the right idea. We needed to raise the floor, otherwise we would never get more teachers into the business or keep them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They used to have an incentive program for the teachers called the Best and the Brightest, where if you were above the 80th percentile on your SATs and you had a good college GPA, you could get extra money in a grant. I used to get an extra $3,500 a year off that grant. That got rolled away and taken away to bring new teacher pay up higher. So if anyone has a right to gripe about what's being done, it's kind of like me, and even I'm like, it was better to take my money away and raise that floor for everybody than to not do it. But
Now,
if you look at what he promised us less testing at one point, and he made it sound like he was going to take away the amount of testing that we put these poor kids through. And
Right.
when I say testing, we're talking, the 16-year-olds, they go through a decent amount of testing. It's not unreasonable for them. But when you're making 8-year-olds sit there for hours on end to take tests, you've kind of lost the way, if you will.
yeah, they can't keep that focus that
And
long.
yeah, and they've now taken it from, instead of the state testing being one thing at the end of the school year, there's multiple testings multiple times through the year. And the idea is that familiarity is going to breed comfort. That's not how this works. If you have a kid who has test anxiety, you're not going to break them through immersion on that. The way you get them past the test anxiety is through success and them understanding that they are able to do things. So we have this entire system, and just ask who benefits from more testing. It's the testing companies that are up there lobbying to sell the testing materials, to sell the textbook that goes to the test, that sells the training for the teachers to use the textbook materials that go to the test. I forget what rule of philosophy it is, but if you measure the amount of nails that are produced by people who create nails, if you measure it by weight, they're going to make one giant nail. If you measure it by numbers, they're going to make a whole bunch of tiny little ones eventually, because they will figure out how to get the most pay out of their labor. So we need to correct the incentives that are in the school structure to begin with, and then start doing what's right for the kids. You said it's not to talk about it being a jail with guards, but our schools look like prisons. When was the
They
last time
do.
you heard about any kid past elementary school having recess? And they're still kids. They need to get that energy out.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Jacqueline, you were talking earlier about some of the teachers that called you that were promised pay and then ended up not getting paid. What is there that Robert might know about that he can help us with?
Well, there's a large number of teachers, and he would know how that all worked, that had worked additional time during their planning time, and they were promised, I believe it was for every 15 um, planning periods or class times, they were supposed to be compensated X amount of dollars. Some have received 1/5 or 1/10 of that. Some have received zero, and it was dispersed so unevenly, and it was just a complete mess. I think the district failed. Speaking with Robert earlier, and he could elaborate more. They failed to communicate some of the contract changes. Am I right about that, Robert?
See, this is where it becomes hard to get a consistent answer every single time. But
Mm-hmm.
on the big picture, when we went into COVID, they established money that was to help pay for the coverage that was being provided, where you work through your planning period. And that planning period is the time where the teachers are planning lessons, grading papers, attending meetings, all things that have to get done anyways. So if you're working in that period, you're staying after to do the other things. So it's not that you're paying somebody more to work the same hours they would work. It's that you're paying them for what gets tacked down at the end of the day. So going a couple years after COVID, there was this money. It's referred to as ESSER, ESSER funds. Some of it was set aside each year to pay for this coverage. When the teachers who were doing the coverage were receiving the full pay according to the bonus structure, which is you get paid your hourly rate times the 45 minutes on high school or middle school to cover the class for the day. And then every 15 days, you had a $1,000 bonus on top to compensate you for having given up 2 weeks of your planning time to cover for other teachers, because now you're working on the weekend, right? If you break it down, it's less than $100 a day still for you to be doing all of this. Now, it's an incredible bonus. That's a lot of money, especially if you're covering all the time. The 1 year I covered, and I was paid for it, I covered 120 days. You divide that by 15, even after taxes, that's a huge amount of money to receive when the base salary for teachers is so low to begin with. That money in the years where they were paying the teachers the full amount covered was well over $35 million. I believe the exact number was 36.4 or $36.6 million that it cost them to pay for all this coverage, which again, they only need because of the way they handled COVID. And then following that, because of the teacher shortage they ended up with. So if you don't have a teacher shortage, you don't have to pay for coverage as it is, because there's a teacher in the classrooms to begin with. Coming through last year, they allowed teachers to continue to cover under the understanding that the new coverage with that bonus incentive built in was still in play. And the language of the contract per the arbitrator was that that language bonus was still in play while this was occurring. Unfortunately, it was communicated at a certain point in time last year that that was not the case and the coverage was not going to continue to be paid. So when the arbitrator ruled in favor of the union that the district would have to pay out more money, it was only supposed to cover for part of the year, and that communication wasn't perfect. So the district was paying some people their bonus coverage last year, but only some, to the tune of something like 2.6, $2.8 million, only for a very limited number of teachers, and everyone else was getting told, no, you don't get the money.
Mm.
At which point, T.A.L.C files the grievance, does what the union's supposed to do, fight for the teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The arbitrator rules that, well, because it was made public knowledge, and again, that's subjective language in his opinion, I don't necessarily agree with him. He ruled that, the district owed the teachers about $8.8 million worth of coverage. Well, 8.8 million is not the same as the, 36.6 or whatever that, the full year of coverage was worth the year before. So there's already the situation where there's not going to be the amount of money there was. There's about a fifth of it. He then ruled that because the district was paying some people for the coverage, that they didn't have to pay that full 8.8, and it went down to $5.5 million. Now, $5.5 million sounds like a lot until you math it out for the 5,500 teachers in the district. 5,500, that's roughly $1,000 each, right? And now you have to go through and try to figure out, well, who did coverage, who didn't. And that process was all taken care of by this arbitrator that had to deal with the situation because the union and the school district couldn't come to an agreement on how to solve this problem. The upside is that there was $5.5 million there that the district wouldn't have paid out otherwise. The downside is that there's only $5.5 million, so there's going to be a lot of losers on the teacher's side. It was supposed to be distributed according to who covered in chronological order, so Q1 of last year should have been paid first. But what the union found is when the district first made their first batch of payments and everything, there was very unreliable reporting for how the coverage was done. There's no district-wide system for reporting that coverage. So one school tracks it one way, another school tracks it another. They tried to pull the records. Some people come up on the same records 3 or 4 times. Some people are all there together, depending on how this principal secretaries entered this coverage into the system. And things got to be a mess, partially because there was a time crunch in it, and partially because there wasn't a plan for paying the teachers to begin with, because the district was not going to pay. And unfortunately, since the union didn't have access to that information, and it's not the district's way, how to put this, the way the arbitration came down, the union didn't get to decide how it was being paid out, so they didn't have a plan for how to pay it out. After the first round of payments went out, there's only $500,000 left to pay who was left, and who was left that didn't get paid was 60% of the teachers.
Wow.
So people like myself who provided coverage got absolutely nothing, whereas some people who provided the coverage did get what they were supposed to get, and it all just depended on how the district handled it in those schools with those principal secretaries with the documentation. And unfortunately, at one point along the lines, the district had a payroll person send out an email that implied that the union was responsible for who got what money, which is not true. And that hurt the union in a big kind of way, because we have to maintain a 60% membership rate in order to maintain the union. Otherwise, it turns into an election, and you can't fight for teachers and try to keep the union going at the same time when it gets down to that. There's just only so much volunteers can do, because none of us are paid except for the president. And even the president's only paid the same as a teacher who's working a year-round contract for his years of experience. No one's getting rich on the local level with the unions. So myself and other volunteers, are doing our best to keep the numbers up. And here you have this person who's costing us membership because they've put out this false information that the union decided that some teachers weren't going to get paid, when the union had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that sounds typical. I mean, they try to gaslight everybody. Jacqueline,
You would
The
think,
short of it is they took what should be a $5.5 million win for the union against what the district did, and they turned it into a loss for us because we lost hundreds of members over it.
right? And you would think that the district, when they knew they had X amount of dollars, they would sit down with the union and say, let's go over the books. Let's try to do this as fairly as we can, and we'll try to contribute as well, because they have no issues with contributing all these fake contracts that they have in the past to their buddies and their friends. And if you look at the salaries of the administrators at the district, I'm not talking about the school levels. I've been concentrating basically at the district, where they have created in the last 12 months an enormous amount of coordinators, directors, executive directors. We have 4 regional superintendents. They had cost, to run their department. Now they're pulling out the principal from South Fort Myers High School, Ed Matthews. They're going to make him some kind of deputy superintendent. You have Savage in there also assisting the superintendent. How many superintendents are we going to have? I thought we only had one,
They also made the position for Mr. Savage's brother.
That's right, who got a promotion as some kind of coordinator. His wife, who has some kind of coordinator position. It's endless. I could not believe the additional chief position that was created for safety. Never was a position before. And I was telling Joe earlier, Robert, in 50 years, you've never seen such a top heavy school district in Lee County like you have this now. All you have to do is look at the list of all these titles, redundant. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. To me, that's stealing from the employees that are truly breaking their backs and sacrificing their own family time and their personal time to try to get kids and students to be successful. It's ridiculous.
And every employee you steal from is a child you're stealing from,
That's right.
because every teacher that quits on the elementary school level, that's a classroom of kids that doesn't have their teacher. And when those kids get split up and pushed into the other classrooms and overpopulate those classrooms, that's all those other kids too that now have less teacher attention to them. So I think I did the math one time, every elementary school teacher is potentially 200 kids that are impacted when that teacher leaves. Every high school teacher, it's 450 kids that are impacted when they leave. I think the best example you've ever shown me was when you sent me the contract they had for the lock replacement at the one high school. Now, replacing a lock is so easy, even this guy can do it. There's no reason why the custodial staff couldn't have been paid overtime to come in on Saturday and replace those locks and have it done correctly and professionally by the custodial staff. But instead, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on what should have cost them chump change. Understand that, that contract went to a local business. I think Jacqueline has some opinions on that local business, but I also think that we shouldn't be outsourcing things that can be done in-house at a school.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Jacqueline. Now start.
It was millions of dollars. It was millions of dollars, and both companies didn't even have experience at installing locks. So many of them were installed upside down. They became loose. One of them fell on the foot of a child at Lehigh High School, and a child got injured. It was insanity. So we had to send in our own maintenance department, which, by the way, we had 4 employees in the maintenance department that, guess what? They were lock installers. Yeah. And we did not use them because they were giving contracts to their friends, who one ended up being now a county commissioner. Go figure.
And I'm sorry, but this is the teacher in me, but wouldn't it have been better to set up a volunteer list for the kids that were getting ready to graduate, where they could go in on Saturday with those locksmiths that work for the district already and learn that skill as a trade?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. They don't think about common sense things that could actually help the students. And the reason is they don't care about the students. They really don't care about the teachers. All they care about is how they can profit off of this job. It is nothing more than a job and a stepping stone to another political branch. And that's all this is.
Exactly.
I would say the other thing to worry about is not being sued.
But I don't think
anyone who lawyers up seems to get their way.
Sometimes they don't even care. They have so many lawyers on their payroll as well. They have the Henderson firm. They have some other firm that they hired when the whole lawsuit was going on, where Chris Patrica was involved. They hired her a private attorney. To fight certain individuals, they'll fight them all the way to the end and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm sure it's into the millions. I remember one year when I did a public records request, they had paid out like $4 million, I believe it was, to the Henderson firm in one year. And that was only one firm, A lot of times I think that they should just be going into mediation with employees that have issues. And sometimes they just put their heels down, and they don't like whistleblowers. They don't like employees that come forward and see solutions to problems and call them out and say, and employees aren't really even calling them out. I know a lot of employees that have come forward and say, hey, this could be done better like this, or I have a problem with this. I see there's an issue with this, and this is not beneficial for the students in my class or whatever. And immediately they put a target on their back because they think they're a troublemaker for bringing forward issues that could be repairable,
And the thing about it is they know that the teachers and the paraprofessionals are not going to be able to fight them legally. they can't afford it, and especially with big name attorneys like the Henderson firm, and all they do is they'll swamp you in until they just flood you with paperwork until they know that they've already beat you when you file. They're just going to keep you, so they're going to run you broke trying to fight them.
Yeah.
It's just a
That
sad,
is-
it's a toxic environment for any educator to even think about teacher retention. Look how they treat them. I mean, how can you promote the school district knowing that even if you refer people to come here and work, you know that the possibility of being shortchanged, abused, taken advantage of, not being paid properly, not being appreciated. It's just the culture of the school district is horrendous for an employee.
Could we focus on that for a moment?
Yes,
So it was
yes.
brought to my attention that they're offering a $3,000 incentive for new teachers to come and work. You know, that's a one-time bonus. Now, you know, I myself am fortunate enough to have purchased my home right after Irma before everything went crazy, and I purchased cheap and it's very affordable. They have a large number of their teachers who every year have moving expenses. I'm just saying, you know, a paying you to stay in the county when you have to locate from one place to another would be one heck of a thing they could help with. Or just
Yeah,
straight up a $3,000 one-time payment to all the teachers would go a long way to helping.
Absolutely. I agree with
yeah.
you.
Because there's no
It
small
is a
number of teachers
problem.
that say they're leaving because of the cost of the housing.
Yeah, there is in Southwest Florida. It would be very hard for someone to live off a teacher's salary, especially if it was a single parent, and especially if they had a child. It would be just impossible for you to live in your own home and keep up with all the bills in Southwest Florida on that salary.
Yeah. I drive, well, not currently, but I have driven Uber after hours. I was making more money driving Uber after Hurricane Ian than I was teaching.
It's amazing. Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Robert Daniels for joining us tonight, and Jacqueline Perez for taking time out of their evening. This is really important that you folks start to focus in on how your tax money is being spent and where is your tax money going and who's benefiting from your tax money. It's certainly not your children, and it's certainly not the teachers and the support staff. Robert, thanks for being here. Jacqueline, as always.
And
I'm
let me
Smokin.
say, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
I'm Smokin Joe. Love, peace, and gator grease.
And thank you, Robert. You've always been an advocate for the employees. I've watched you for many, many years, and I so appreciate everything that you do. You are so